Please note that this video contains spoilers for the subject and the series and/or franchise leading up to this entry. Put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. I either have or will cover other parts of this franchise, and this video either is or will be linked below. I'm not going to restate here what I did or will say in the other video. These videos get long enough as it is. I've reviewed other parts of this franchise. The links are in the description box. I will be with you shortly. Just gotta make the last minute adjustments. And we are just about ready. Let's try that again. We can get the software working properly. And we appear to be just about ready now. You know, I'd say something funny about an over-reliance on technology, but I fear that the irony meter would explode, given how much of it I'm using to make this video. And 3.5 minutes in, we are ready. Notes taken while watching. I'm going to be honest about this movie, and that includes a partial defense. But I'm going to try to go into some of the positives, but I will also be honest about the weaknesses. Let's see if we get, there we go. That particular note I wrote before watching. The rest of this section are going to be things that, yeah. Clever to send an attractive woman as the marshal. She identifies herself as a marshal, makes it clear that she is there for him. You know, there's no doubt that this is indeed Tony Stark. And then she, you know, what's this, subpoena, I think it's called. She hands him the subpoena, you know, just as she's supposed to. It's not her fault that he thinks Marshall is her name. You know, it's like in the first Rush Hour. You know, didn't correct the assumption, never claimed it to be true either. You know, about Jackie Chan speaking English. Potts is like, I can't believe you just did this. And he's like, you're going to have to be more specific. And Tony's like, be CEO. And Pepper's like, You're drunk already at this early in the day? And Vanko gets the passport. You know, if your Hollywood movie has a scene in Russia, you have to show at least some shady people doing shady stuff. It is literally the law. Excuse me. I love the performance of the guy that Natalie has to convince to let Tony use that table. He is so exasperated. The increasing toxicity level is a great ticking clock, which in my videos on the first Iron Man movie, I believe it was, I talk about the great ticking clocks in that movie. I really appreciate them putting the classic suitcase Iron Man suit in the movie. You know, in the commentary track, Jon Favreau talks about they had to like make it a bit more modern to make it convincing and such, and that, yeah, definitely. But yeah, that is, you know, for those who haven't read the comics, for a while, that was how Tony transported the suit around. You know, it's not like he can do the Spider-Man and Superman thing of just wearing it under his clothes. You know, no, it's you know, it's way too bulky for something like that. So he would carry around a suitcase, as businessmen are wont to do, and it would open up and there'd be the suit. And yeah. And they couldn't really have fitted into the first movie, I don't really know where they would have put it, at least. And yeah, this was a great way to, and Tony, of course, referred to it as the football, you know, like the nuclear, yeah, I forget what it's called. Maybe it is just the football, but the president's suitcase that allows him to start nuclear war. Which, you know, yeah, I rather enjoyed South Park's rendition of Trump being handed that. I like football. Now, while it's not as good of a movie as the first one, possible understatement, I have to admit the action is cool. At least some of the comedy is genuinely funny. It's just too bad that it pushes things too far, although I'm not sure that I'd say that it does so in the action department. I'd say it gets that just right. You know, there are movies that don't pace action well. You know, this is sometimes a problem with movies of Paul W. Anderson, for example, and the remake of Total Recall. You know, it's too much. It's just relentless and just wears you out. And there is you know, the action in this gets big and there is a good amount of it, but it's not too much. And yeah, you know, the comedy, Pepper's just maybe a little too angry, too upset, especially very early in the movie, you know, shouting and screaming and such, and just, you know, not constantly, but it feels maybe a little bit misogynistic that the character to be doing that is the woman. You know, it's not Happy, it's not Tony. Now, let's see how to best do this. Motivation and concept that Ivan wants to make God bleed, bringing in the sharks, is clever, but the movie doesn't really deliver on it. It's just that Ivan gets another shot at Tony and at getting his revenge. You know, if they really wanted to capitalize on make God bleed, basically Ivan should have been out of the movie when he gets captured and put in jail. He should have spent the rest of the movie in jail. Maybe he looks up on a TV screen, sees, you know, whatever villain would take over, sees them, you know, going for God now that he's made him bleed, and like smiles with, you know, realizing that he won. But I have to admit, I do really like that he stays. When Justin is unsure that Ivan has understood what he said, you know, it's a lot like when Butters is in Mexico, that one particular joke where he literally didn't understand a word and just sat there. If the Palladium bar is smoking, why can they touch it with their bare hands and not get burnt? I don't know, maybe I'm just ignorant about chemistry or whatever to that always bugged me. Why do you need a Jaeger, Tony? You expecting kaiju? Natalie kind of encourages Tony's worst instincts, and like Pepper does, one could almost say that she's at fault for some of what goes wrong. But then she is there to test him. It's one thing to, okay, sure, when things aren't going wrong, Tony is, does well, but that's not good enough. You have to know if he's going to be able to do well when things are going completely wrong, and that's maybe something that Avengers, the first movie, proves. He can actually still really get get done what he needs to get done, even when everything's going wrong, where in this movie he can't. So, character growth. But yeah, she's there to test him. If she had tried that same stuff with Rhodes, he would have passed with flying colors. They have to see if his personality, Tony's personality, negative personality traits were known long before he became Iron Man. But then when S.H.I.E.L.D. learned that he was Iron Man, yeah, they had to figure, it's like this thing of, we maybe kind of sort of want to recruit you, but we need to know if you're going to be, more of a liability. I like that the fight between the two friends in suits uses wrestling moves increased in power by what the suits can do. I think the first thing, yeah, Rhodes like walks up, puts his hand on his shoulder, and standing behind Tony, and Tony uses the jet propulsion to like throw him back. I don't know wrestling, so I don't know what the movie's called, but yeah, you use your back to smack the other person into something. Yeah, that's a wrestling move, and because he's got the jet propulsion boots, yeah. Jumping ahead a bit, I don't understand why Rhodes has a problem with Tony's suggestion to use the, let's call it, sidekick move against Ivan. Seems to me like a good strategy. I guess they really want more arguing there, even if it didn't make sense for them to argue. And what exactly else are they even going to do? They've tried everything else. He doesn't have the laser thing anymore. They've tried the War Machine has tried his, conventional guns on him. He tried the bunker buster. Tony tries the missiles. Yeah, I'm not really sure what. One thing I did know, does Tony at all in this use the rocket that he used on the tank in the first movie, and that he uses against Ultron, let's say, in Age of Ultron? I'm not sure he uses it even once. Seems like it would have been useful, but yeah, I don't know. Now, Justin didn't think to watch what Vancouver was doing. I guess he didn't watch the Tony in captivity scenes of the first movie. Hammer introducing the weapons is very cool. There being a message at the end of the expo footage is stupid. So no one else has ever watched all of the footage, despite him helping found S.H.I.E.L.D., which they say in this movie that he did. So it's not as though that was like thought up later, and then, this is a thing that they couldn't quite grandfather in properly. And if S.H.I.E.L.D. knew, how could they not? And how could they not know? Why didn't they just tell Tony, there is a message for you at the end of the reel? What if Tony didn't watch it the whole thing through? Time is of the essence. It is literally life or death. Seeing Bill O'Reilly on TV in this really helps you appreciate what a good thing it is that he is no longer on TV. Tony throwing the strawberries in the garbage shows that he is as bad at throwing things away as Dummy is at helping build and adjust things. I forget if we're ever told what the new element Tony discovered is called. Maybe Starkium, Egoium, Narcissisium. Is the new element how we make Stark Tower Energy Independent or whatever in the first Avengers movie. I forget. But it would make a lot of sense, certainly. It's something that he couldn't have done before he invented the new element in this movie, and he hadn't quite gotten around to fully, you know, finishing it before the start of the Avengers movie. You know, it's not like he just, you know, press a button and there it is. It's hard work, and you know, Tony's never been afraid of hard work, but it does take a little time for him to be able to, you know. Hammer dances at the expo. Sam Rockwell didn't expect that they would use that. He did it to get into character. I really hope they told him that he didn't find out that it was there by watching the movie, and I'm not sure I think that it really fits in the movie. I don't really read Hammer as the way he's depicted here as someone who would do that, where other people could see him. You know, he literally did it on the stage because he expected it to cut to him once he, you know, rather than before he got on stage, because he wanted to do it as close to when he's giving the speech as possible. So, yeah. Ultimately, one of the only genuinely wrong things Justin does is not work with Pepper and Natalie at the end, you know. And Natasha, by the yeah, she hasn't. He doesn't know that it's anyway. And then after that, he says, "You're gonna pin this on me." You know, you did help you know, you helped a guy. You broke a guy out of prison, and then, you know, yeah. But you know it, which is not. That's really more him being, yeah. So those are three of the things he does wrong. Among the things he does wrong. But, I mean, he didn't know that Vanko was going to try to murder the people at the expo. You know, he told him, I want you to help me build suits. You know, the thing he really should have done is watch him and make sure that, you know, which is also, it's annoying how naive he is in this. And, yeah, but yeah, it's not as though he did actually intentionally, you know, look at how shocked he is when the suits start going nuts, you know. And yeah, and he should have admitted when Tony confronts him, he should have admitted, yes, I have been working with Vanko, and he is in this, you know, he's in my building, you know. But yeah, just to briefly, some have said that, like, you know, Black Widow didn't need to fight her way through that hallway. You know, I've already said most of the things I have to say about that fight, but I do think that, you know, they've established that Hammer cannot contact his men. The phones are down, the cells are down, that's what Vanko made sure of. Basically, Black Widow has two options. She can go in there and say, you know, I'm working with Hammer, or she can fight her way through the hallway, and fighting her way through the hallway is probably the quick run. I suppose she could have dragged him to the car, but he would have fought it every step of the way, and her presenting him in that hallway doesn't... He would probably just say, don't listen to her. I'm being coerced. You know, I don't think that I've said the negative things I have to say about the scene. I don't think that that is one of them necessarily, but I don't know, maybe this is apologisting. But... And Tony and Pepper have their first kiss. You know, in the trailer, she only kisses his helmet. In Avengers, Tony also introduces himself to Shoot to Thrill. But then this movie also uses Highway to HE double hockey sticks. I don't know enough about AC/DC to say, but I can imagine with the first one using Back in Black, there weren't really any good ones left to use in Avengers. So yeah, they ended up just having to reuse one of them, and yeah, you know, but that's, I always, when I watched The Avengers, I had forgotten that Shoot to Thrill was in this. And I've rewatched The Avengers more times than I rewatched this movie. Go figure. So I had forgotten that it was also in this one. So, you know, I don't know, 2 re-watches of this ago or something, you know, was when I realized, oh, right, they did use Shoot to Thrill in this one too. Now. And the movie is an hour and 53 minutes, not counting the end credits, which you already know you should stay through, and 1 hour and 59 if you do count them. Now, that brings us to notes taken before rewatching. And once again, these are notes that I've taken over, I don't know, the last couple of weeks, I guess, since, yeah, basically since I got the idea to do these, you know, redo these phase 1 ones. Which is, again, this is not to replace the ones I've already done on these phase 1 ones. It's to, you know, it's to get into more stuff that I've thought of since, and some of which I can say as reflecting on the, you know, the ones that came later, which you'll see. The few things left that I haven't already said about Iron Man 1 in any of these videos, they made some really crucial, really smart decisions. Making Jarvis an AI gives Tony someone to talk to while in the suit, so he isn't silent. You know, for those who only know of the MCU, in the comics, Jarvis is a regular butler. You know, and part of it was also that they wanted people to not be reminded too much of Batman. You know, Jarvis and Alfred are not dissimilar overall, although Alfred, I'm not sure Jarvis was in the military, and Alfred, you know, medic and, you know, such. But other than that, they're both butlers and confidant? I forget if Jarvis is. Anyway, yeah, you know, and Iron Man 1 was being released the same year as The Dark Knight. So they really didn't want to be like, oh, you know, yeah, there's this Batman movie, but how about this character very few people in the mainstream know about, who, you know, isn't being directed by Christopher Nolan, and, you know, yeah. It's you know, now everybody knows who Iron Man is, but apparently before the first movie came out, a lot of people thought that the character was literally a robot, which is, you know, absolutely. There are versions of Iron Man where the suits, you know, have so much AI that they can run by themselves. But the idea that Iron Man is a robot, period, yeah, you know, no fan can understand that. So yeah, they had to do like videos showing, no, look, the suit opens and there's a person inside. It's not a robot, you know. And, you know, the IMDb fact clarifies, no, he's not a cyborg either. You know, it's a suit. It's an exosuit. Now, yes, to get back, there we go. To get back to them, you know, crucial smart decisions made in making Iron Man 1. Showing Tony's face while he's in the suit means that, you know, we're not just looking at the faceplate all the time, which shows no emotion. You know, in the comics, you know, they do this with Spider-Man as well. Sometimes they'll, you know, twist it a little bit so it does show some, you know, Spider-Man can, you know, the eyes can be normal, big, or they can be like really small, like when he's seriously really, you know, the Clint Eastwood, you know, eyes, yeah, and yeah, sometimes they would make the face slit make a little smile or a frown, but people are not gonna be as accepting of that in a movie. You know, it's like, isn't the plate supposed to be, you know, completely, yeah, we're not supposed to, it's not supposed to be able to move like that, you know. So yeah, showing his face, and then, you know, there's like, how are you showing his face? No, no, look, we're seeing, you know, we're seeing the HUD that he's using to, you know, so there's some detail. It's not just showing his face, which, why are you showing his face inside of a helmet, you know? But yeah, and as such, he can act with his face as well. And, you know, so if everyone who's in an exosuit in the MCU, at some point you see, you know, the face through, you know, pretty much everyone. You know, you did it with Obadiah Stane, did it with, you know, do it with War Machine, you know, yeah. And, excuse me, and on the, excuse me, improvisation, Gwyneth Paltrow apparently had trouble. This is from the IMDb trivia, I think, because she wasn't sure what Robert Downey Jr. would say next. I find this really works in the film's favor. It's as if, even after all these years, Pepper does not know what Tony will say or do next, which, yeah, that sums up, you know, he's so impulsive, and yeah, and the thing with the, you know, the movie showing us Mark 1, Mark 2, Mark 3, lets the film feature two classic sets of the suit before reaching the more current one. And I realize that the current one isn't, you know, there are other more, you know, I forget, I didn't, it's been a lot of time. I actually, I read the first couple of issues of the Ultimates when they came out. I'm not sure I've reread them since, so I don't remember if that was what what the Iron Man suit looked like then, but certainly it is one of the more modern, you know, where, yeah, again, for people who haven't read the comics, the very first suit was this huge, bulky thing, which to us today looks ridiculous, but back then they were like, what, it's a mechanical suit. Of course it's going to be big. You know, you can't make technology that small. You know, it's like how with Star Trek, they literally, in the original series, they literally thought, in the future, human beings will be able to travel, you know, at such high speeds that we can visit other, you know, other planets that actually support life. But they also thought that we'd still need, what's it called, phone lady, you know, Uhura, and I realize that's not all she is, but yeah, she sits there and she presses whenever someone has to communicate. They didn't think that we'd ever get past operator, I guess is what it's called, you know, which, again, to us today looks ridiculous, but yeah. And so, and then one of the, you know, later ones was a bit more sleek, but it was silver, which, again, that's not what we want Iron Man looking like, you know. That's what it looked like back then, which is also just, you know, it's a suit. Of course it's going to look metallic and gray, or actually I think the original one was like golden, which, yeah, I don't blame them for not putting that in the movie, but yeah, you know, we want the color scheme with, you know, you've got you've got some gold, and then, you know, yeah, basically golden, and what is it he said, hot rot red, you know. That's, yeah, because would we believe for a second if he literally walked out of the cave in the Mark III suit? What, you gave it a paint job? How did you make it so small and tight and just, no, we would not believe that. You know, the first one legitimately looks like he built a cave with a box of scraps. You know, he banged this thing together in a week out of, you know, parts from missiles and such. You know, the reason it's so bulky is because he basically took the metal off rockets and missiles and just bent it just enough that it would fit around his body, that it would make him, you know, basically impervious to bullets, which was what he needed it to do. That and fly briefly, you know. Now, And, you know, that also enables them to have Tony build both his Nemesis suit and the suit of his partner in this movie, which is, you know, yeah, it's like if it, well, technically he doesn't build Stane's suit, but the Mark I suit becomes the inspiration for Stane's suit, which, again, if Stane wasn't looking at a suit, and the team of engineers, if they weren't looking at a finished suit, yeah, you know, yeah, Tony Stark can do it, but these guys, they need some, you know, guidance counselor. They need something to tell them what to, you know, it's like if you were finishing a jigsaw puzzle, but you didn't have the box, which shows what it's supposed to look like at the end. You know, that's expert mode of puzzle solving, jigsaw puzzle solving. I wonder if the Punisher's jigsaw puzzle solves really well. And it's also, you know, they also found a good way to work in the comic book character alter ego names, you know, in the, yeah, in this and Iron Man, you know, fairly consistently, you know, Stane says we're Ironmongers, which, you know, it would have felt off if once he's in the suit he says, call me Ironmonger or something, you know, no, that doesn't work. And, you know, in this one, you want to be the War Machine, yeah. Which is also, in the third one, it's made completely clear people are actually calling him War Machine, you know, or they were, you know, because now he's Iron Patriot. So that is a little, but I don't know, I guess the idea is that once he started using it to work for the military, for the government, they were like, we need to call it something. And Rhodes is like, you know, War Machine, that's kind of catchy. Yeah. Or maybe it's a complete coincidence. Someone else came up with, yeah. And, you know, where the 90s Batman sequels went too bright with costumes and such, then you had the early X-Men ones where they capitalized on black leather, popularized by Blade and the Matrix. You know, Spider-Man was as bright as the comic, and now this makes the smart choice of using the same colors but tinting them darker, so it feels realistic whilst being respectful of the comic, without which it wouldn't exist. And yes, there are other comic book movies other than those in this period, and I'm not saying that this is the very first movie to do, you know, I'd say that, you know, I can't hate the movie Daredevil. I've done videos on it. You know, see those for what I say on them overall, but I do appreciate that they, again, if you look at the classic comics, it is just red. You know, it's not that dark of a tinted red, which, yeah, in the movie they said, okay, let's tint it red. And they also made the decision to make it leather instead of spandex, because again, in comic books, especially back in the 60s, yeah, people accepted, yeah, it's spandex. You know, in the Raimi Spider-Man movies, we don't really know what fabric it's made out of, as far as I recall. I really should be remembering. It hasn't been that long since I watched them. Again, since Spider-Man's Infinity War. Yeah, the you know, it makes a reasonable amount of sense if you're gonna dress up and go out and fight. Yeah, leather or something. But yeah, like the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and other comic book movies after Batman Begins, it does the Batman Begins thing. You know, the hero gradually improves his suit and gadgets when he discovers limitations, by those limitations getting him actually hurt or almost hurt, you know. And yeah, it was a good idea in Batman Begins, and it's a good idea to imitate that, because again, it makes sense, and that is also a good way to work in, you know, that's, without that you really wouldn't have the Mark 1 through 3 element in the first Iron Man movie. You know, in the cave he doesn't really change it, but then once he gets back, you know, obviously he doesn't have the suit when he gets back to America at all, but I doubt that he wouldn't have kept using that suit. He would have built a new one anyway. And so, you know, gradually he improves them and gets to the final one, which is when he gets the paint job, which he has since stuck to. Now, the flying is exciting in this. I don't know why I said it wasn't in my old videos. I think some of my older videos, you know, from like 2010, or, you know, yeah, early videos. You know, I started making videos in like September of 2009, so obviously 2010 is early in my video making, vlogging career. Both Iron Man 2 and the second Paranormal Activity movie, it was like I really liked the first one, and I don't know, when I was younger I didn't really like sequels. Even if I maybe wanted more, I was kind of predisposed to not liking sequels, so I looked for things wrong with it and had a hard time admitting when things weren't wrong, you know. And I maintain that the second Paranormal Activity movie does make a lot of mistakes, but I was wrong to say that the flying was bad in Iron Man 2. Yeah. And it is, you know, then when you know, I love the Avengers and Iron Man 3 right from the start, as well as Paranormal Activity 3, and I still think the sixth one is fun, and the fourth one, it's watchable, basically. You know, it's not completely, and the fifth one is just, I can't hate that movie because it's just so wild how much it just goes in such a complete direction, and that ending is just, yeah, again, I refer you to the videos I already made on that movie, on those movies, for more detail. But yeah, the Iron Man 2, yeah, I was too critical at times. Now, I think it's interesting for the movie to deal with the expectation that you hand over the tech to the military. You know, a lot of movies would just have, you know, Iron Man flying around the Middle East killing terrorists. And that part of the first film was an important part of the origin story, and it was a way to get action scenes into the film. But if they kept going in that direction, it would end up too much of escapism, and the you know, part of it is also that you want some, you know, and that's something yeah, all three Iron Man movies comments on the whole military-industrial complex. Yeah, I think it's been forever since I actually said that out loud. So, what was it? I think someone said that sometimes when you say words, a lot of times eventually they start sounding weird to you. Yes, and the war on terror and such. And again, the first one did do that. And then also have this, you know, yeah, scenes of the American good guy fighting, you know, Middle Eastern bad guys. But then it did also show that not, you know, some of the, you know, the civilians in the first movie, they're not made out to be, you know, yeah, it's clear that they are victims of the terrorists, same as American civilians are. But yeah, you know, it's something that Jon Favreau brings up in the commentary track, that yeah, you know, there's some expectation that he would just keep doing that. And yeah, I mean, this movie does not have a single scene of Iron Man fighting Middle Eastern terrorists, which is definitely something that a lot of people would have expected after the way the first one played out. And yeah, I really appreciate that they had the nerve to the guts to actually say, you know what, let's go in a different direction. And to get back to my prepared notes, yeah, it would end up too much escapism. The character of Iron Man is very interesting in the right hands, and obviously you want different aspects of the Stark family having destroyed lives catching up to Tony. It would be boring if they just stuck with the first one, which again works great there. But yeah, it's this thing of, you know, yeah, ultimately all three are, it's not a spoiler for the third one. You realize it, I think, 5 minutes in, that that's part of what the movie is going to be about. But yeah, ultimately that is, that is the decision they made. That's the decision they made in the first one, and they very much stuck to, they could have said, okay, we'll make it a subplot, but instead they made it the overall focus. The first movie is entirely about what is Tony Stark going to do now that he's realized that, he can't close his eyes to it anymore. Yes, his weapons kill, and sometimes they kill the wrong people, which, is a very, if the movie had been made today, it would probably basically feature actual, like, mass shooting or something, because yeah, anyone making and selling weapons, you can try to close your eyes to it, but ultimately your weapons are going to end up in the wrong hands, and they're going to get people killed. And I'm not saying that the world should have no weapons, but when you make and sell weapons, you have a responsibility to try to make sure they don't end up in the wrong hands. And Tony Stark in the first movie realizes he hadn't done enough. And so he spends the rest of the movie trying to, trying to address that. And again, they could easily have had this movie just be more of that. He goes back to Gulmira or something, but yeah, instead they say, well, what about Tony's father? And what about... And also just, yeah, it's genuinely interesting to the idea that he would, at the start of the movie, say, I shouldn't give you my armor, and I don't need to, because nobody else can fight me. We saw that in the first movie. Basically, no one can hurt Iron Man except for another person in an Iron Man suit, and Stane's gone, and then, well, if someone else did have it, then you have that issue. And, the IMDb Goofs page, I think that's where it is, does point out all the reasons why, all the issues with Vanco's first attack. And, yeah, among them, if Tony simply flew away from Vanco, then he would be able to, okay, let's say that he can't hit him with something he shoots directly at him. If he shot like a missile to this, far enough to the side of Vanco that he couldn't intercept it with his whips and be thrown back by the explosion, he could do that to both sides of several times, and eventually it would, and yeah, just it wouldn't. And if he flew away, he wouldn't himself be in danger of being hit. And that's, when you choose to pit someone who can fly and who can attack at a range against someone who can't, then you do kind of have that problem. And he's from the comics. I haven't read that much classic Iron Man, so I don't know what they do about it there. If it's similar to the movie, that just when Tony realizes that he's dealing with Whiplash, which they never actually refer to Ivan as, but that's part of what he is. He's made up of a couple of different characters. It's like something Dynamo. I forget. But yeah, if when Tony realizes that it's Whiplash, Whiplash is so close that he can, or maybe he does actually have a suit or get a suit. I'm almost certain that there's a version of Whiplash that doesn't have a suit, like at the start of the movie. I'm not certain if there is one that does, like at the end of the movie, but I do think that it's a logical place to go. And honestly, part of me thinks that they should have had Vanko in a suit much earlier in the film. But yeah, I've already talked about how villain presence is a huge problem with the first two Iron Man movies. And yeah, not the third one. One of the things that the third one does that does somewhat fix something with the first. Again, I love the first one far more than the third one. But yeah, to get back to my notes, I love Sam Rockwell. I really feel like this movie wastes him. He never seems competent or intimidating in this when he can play those so well, even crap like Charlie's Angels, and he should here. They considered him for Tony Stark himself in the first one, so clearly they realized he could play those. I don't see why Justin Hammer, you know, gets mocked so much in this movie. Him being a lesser weapons developer didn't have to be played for laughs like it is. You know, the jokes about it make you wonder how this guy could be the second best in the country. He did not have to be this far below Tony's level. I think it would have been legitimately interesting if he basically, like, in the first movie, once Stain has the Mark I in front of him, he manages to build a suit that is, you know, up to the task of taking on Iron Man. I don't see why Justin Hammer couldn't be in somewhat of a similar position. I actually, although I guess maybe it would be a bit annoying if he ended up not using it at the end. Well, no, actually, yeah, for I think the first hour or so of the movie, you do think that Hammer is trying to make suits, and a lot, you know, we see that he's building a lot of suits, and then I think it's about an hour in, you know, we realize that Vanko is turning them into drones instead, and I think that the climax would have been, I don't know, I mean, I think a lot of movies, a lot of action movies today have a climax where a ton of sentient, not necessarily human beings, but sentient beings who can clearly feel pain and clearly understand enough to, you know, but they're the bad guys, so it's good that the heroes are killing them. I think that it would have been, especially if it had actually been just like, you know, Hammer was going to sell them to the military. If they had been like military personnel in those suits, yeah. So I'm glad that they did turn them into drones. But yeah, you know, and he even says there wasn't that much wrong with the suit. Well, basically what was wrong was that when he tried to turn to the sides, the suit twisted all the way. And that's obviously, I mean, that poor pilot that, you know, I'd like to note that that pilot survived. Yeah, he's just, you know, you snapped his spine, but he survived. Okay, but if he had managed to fix that, if Vanko hadn't turned them into drones, you know, yeah, it seems kind of like, wouldn't he have ended up making perfectly fine suits that didn't, and that's also just, I mean, at the end of the day, the big thing that Tony managed to do was miniaturize a power source. You know, it seems like it shouldn't be that difficult to build a suit that, an exosuit that works, you know, and maybe that should have been the big conflict, that instead of, you know, snapping that guy's spine, it just, the you know, the power source just immediately burns out because it's trying to run such a heavy machine, you know, and that's what happens. You know, that could still have been played for comedy or some, you know. Yeah, I don't think that, yeah, I probably pretty much said what I wanted to say. about it. Yeah, I feel like this movie at times goes way too far for the sake of comedy. And Justin Hammer being, I mean, he's almost like a parody of Tony Stark. It's like if it's as if Justin Hammer was written by like a political cartoonist, as like, you know, what some, you know, considering Tony's politics, it would probably be someone as, you know, progressive as, you know, I try to be, or something. Yeah, if a progressive tried to do like a comic, you know, political comic parody of Tony Stark, Justin Hammer is about what you'd end up with. And yeah, it just doesn't, I don't think it really belongs in an Iron Man movie. And the first and the third get more right how, you know, how dark it can be, and how as funny as the third one gets, I don't think it ever just truly undermines how dark it also gets, and how yeah, these are legitimately scary concepts. You know, you have the, let's see, yeah, the I'm not gonna spoil the third, but yeah, the idea, you know, the start of the first movie, yeah, the idea that these terrorists would end up either with, you know, either both, or yeah, whatever, with the Jericho missiles, or, you know, what was it he said, 12 of the Iron Man suits, you know. And then in this one, I appreciate that they at least acknowledge it, but yeah, the I can buy that the North Koreans would build a really crap one, because yeah, you know, until fairly recently, we didn't really buy that they could do that all that well with their missile launching, you know. So, and certainly in 2010, the yeah, the idea that they would do a terrible job. But yeah, maybe the other countries shouldn't be building really bad suits, but should just really be struggling with the power source. That was also something that, you know, that was Stain's big problem. We don't have a power source that's small enough to fit inside the suit and powerful enough to run the entire suit, you know. And that's what Vanko has at the start of the movie. It's almost as if they had to like rewrite a bunch of it, and both elements were left in the final script. That, yeah, you know, Vanko proves that other people can have the kind of power source that enables someone to, you know, wear something that can take on Iron Man, at least if he's close enough and Iron Man doesn't fly away, you know. And let's see, and then, you know, for a while the yeah, actually, do the drones at the end even use, like, Vanko has the, does Vanko does Vanko and the drones there at the end use arc reactor technology? Maybe they do. I forget. But yeah, you know, that really seems like that should be the conflict. You know, could someone else actually get their hands on arc reactor technology, or otherwise power something like that, instead of just, ooh, heard it, or look at how bad a weapons developer Justin Hammer is. You know, the second best in the country is really going to be that incompetent. Maybe it's like, you know, I don't really know Jon Favreau's politics, but maybe he is progressive and he's like, look at how terrible weapons developers are, even at their own job. But again, that's not exactly the problem we're experiencing in the real world. It's not that they're terrible at designing weapons, you know. But yeah, let's see. Now, the movie tried to make Ivan kind of like a darker Tony Stark, You know, the first thing we see him do is grieve over his father and build an arc reactor. This obviously mirrors Tony's introduction in the first movie. You know, he lost his father, you know, and he's building this suit in a really bad, you know, environment, kind of. Excuse me. But we cared about Tony. We don't, excuse me, care about Ivan. Mickey Rourke said that they... Actually, before I get into that, should it maybe have been like you know, Fury says, you know, oh, shipped him off to Siberia, so he spends the next 20 years in a vodka-fueled rage. Was he actually like in a camp in Siberia, or was he just, how did he get out if he was in a camp? Certainly there at the start of the movie, they're not in a camp. And yeah, I mean, imagine if at the start of the movie they were in a camp, and the first thing that Ivan does is use the whips to break out of the camp. And then, you know, we never see the camp again for the rest of the movie. But then we don't really see the place where he was for the rest of the movie. Where did he like burn the designs? Does he have them later? Did he just leave them behind in Russia? Because in that case, it seems like anyone could find them and then sell them to the highest bidder. Like Tony said, you know, Vanko could have done instead of attacking Tony in public. But yeah, I think that it would have been, you know, if you did have him, you know, yeah, the Anton dies in Siberia in a camp under horrible conditions. Vanko grew up under those horrible conditions, but he manages to build, you know, yeah, but how could he build it in a, you know, if he's stuck in this camp? Well, Tony built it in a cave with terrorists watching. So yeah, you know, and so he uses it to escape from Siberia, and then he is like, you put, you know, your father put my father in a camp in Siberia. I only just got out. You're gonna pay for that. But instead, I mean, okay, so his father died poor, and he himself grew up in this really bad situation. I don't know. I don't think it's as effective as it, yeah. And again, it's, you know, if he was shipped to Siberia because the Soviet Union, they could tell he's not going to be able to deliver for us, then why couldn't he deliver if he had the designs? If Vanko, yeah, he already had the designs. I don't know. I buy that Ivan himself waited to build because it's when Tony shows up on, you know, on TV and he says, I am Iron Man, that, you know, that's basically a middle finger to the Vankos. You know, it's like, you know, this is Stark tech. This is not your, you know, you had nothing to do with this. And yeah, so Vanko is like, everyone is going to see that you're not the only one who can, you know, it's not your tech. It's not only your tech. And yeah. Now, yeah, to get back to my notes. Mickey Rourke said that they deleted a lot of scenes that made him more sympathetic. I don't know if any of those scenes came before him building this arc reactor. I mean, maybe it was, I forget if in the commentary track, yeah, I'm not sure that it was always going to be the opening of the film. And yeah, maybe there would have been at least one scene making Ivan more sympathetic that led into the arc. I could totally see that. You know, the way that the scene plays out, if he had by then already had our sympathy, you know, I mean, he doesn't necessarily show that much emotion in the situation, but then him and his father had, you know, they didn't have the best of relationships because the vodka-fueled rage and all that. Yeah, I think that could have worked, and that, you know, that is a thing with the MCU. A lot of stuff gets deleted, and stuff left in doesn't necessarily, yeah, sometimes seems to contradict other stuff. And yeah, it happened this early into the MCU. And now, yeah, yeah, I don't know if any of those scenes came before him building this arc reactor. I do think that the movie might have been more interesting with them. As it is, he's fairly one note. And Favreau says in the commentary that the idea of him building the arc reactor is this impending sense of danger, which does mirror the opening of the first one fine. Now, just like in the first movie, just like in the first one and in the Avengers, Tony's introduces himself to the sound of AC/DC. But yeah, in some ways, this movie is just too similar to the first one. When the first one did it, nobody expected that, where here, it's clearly to ensure that people will like this one as well. And yeah, ultimately, the movie has too few surprises. In the first one, the improvised dialogue is snappy. In this one, at times, it just feels like noise, white noise. Maybe they just didn't have that many clever ideas for lines. If that's the case, maybe they should have done retakes. Takes where they accept that they just don't have it in this one. I'd rather have stuff that isn't snappy than stuff that's trying way too hard to be. And again, I don't think it's true of all the dialogue in this. Aha, I did right. In this part also, the action is better than the first one. Yeah, to get into more detail. With Iron Man, you often run into the problem, how can anyone threaten him? In the first one, it's always cool to watch, and there are a number of times where you think he might have gotten hurt. When he's shot out of the sky by the tank, for example. And, there's, with the Mark I, there's that part where the actual machine gun is fired on at him. That seems like it's going to overpower him, but then he manages to fly off. And and Tony when the suit ices up. Now, but yeah, comparatively, Thor and Cap are much more threatened in their first solo films. Even Hulk was threatened even before Abomination shows his ugly face. With Hulk, part of it is also worrying that he will hurt people, especially completely innocent people, which we know he is capable of because we see that he hurt Betty in that original experiment, Now, in this, he is threatened more and more of the time, and not just because he makes stupid decisions while testing the suit and doesn't tell Rhodey it's him when there are jets in the air. There are times his enemies are credible threats to him, and, ultimately, there is pretty much at least one in every action scene in the first one, but, yeah, ultimately, the first Iron Man movie is the only MCU movie so far, and recording this before Infinity War comes out, where the filmmakers don't throw enemies at, in this case Iron Man, that he can't very easily dispatch. The other movies throw enemies at the protagonists that they do have to work in order to be able to fight off, And yeah, the first movie does struggle, and yeah, again, it's all difficult to threaten Iron Man. That's where a greater villain presence in the first one would really have made a difference. And I realize that it's supposed to be that I forget his name. I'm not sure it's ever actually said in the movie, but the guy with the ring, who's representing the 10 rings, which is, they call the organization that, hinting that the Mandarin will eventually show up. And then when he did, a lot of people weren't happy with how they treated him, which I completely understand. But, yeah, 10 Rings guy in the first movie, we're supposed to think he will be the villain, that he will manage to build a suit, and then they have the fake out of revealing that Stain will be, he was funding him, and then he builds a suit and puts it on. But that does leave you with, spend the whole movie building up to, oh, someone else is going to be putting on the suit, and then only at the very end does he put on the suit. It's a really short fight, and it would have been so much more compelling if in all of those scenes you do have someone who is a threat to, which again, the third movie, you realize very early in the third movie that these, the enemies in the third movie are going to be a challenge for Tony to fight. And the movie never really, backs down off of that. And then in that movie, it is in part that he's having trouble finding them. And they don't just throw themselves at him except when he gets in their way, basically. So, yeah. Now, excuse me. Out of the Phase 1 films, Iron Man 1 and Thor are the only ones where the climax is ultimately a little small for the size of the movie. The climax is essentially personal, and so far the other phases all have sufficiently big climaxes, and I will admit sometimes that does mean that they lose the personal. Although I would say overall they tend to do well, but yeah. Not everyone is happy, and I respect that. No one wants an Iron Man solo movie where he doesn't do some science that's cutting edge. First he builds the suit and miniaturizes the arc reactor. Here he creates a new element, and in Iron Man 3, yeah, I believe I go into that in those videos, and again, I'm not going to spoil it here, and it would definitely be a spoiler. Well, I suppose you could, yeah, one thing he does that isn't a spoiler to say is he builds a suit that can come to him in pieces, which, again, is shown almost immediately. In Iron Man 1, Tony always needs saving from press conferences and such. For most of the movie, it's Obi who does it. Then after he goes in the climax, Rhodey takes over for him, or tries to anyway. But even he can't save him from the Senate hearing in this movie. Let's see. This is the first movie in the MCU that is an actual sequel, and so it's the first to demonstrate something that I love about the MCU. I suppose I shouldn't really say sequels as much as later appearances by the same characters, and this is the first time that, this is the third movie in the MCU. But the first of the, the first one was Iron Man. The second one was The Incredible Hulk, wherein we don't see an Iron Man suit. And then you have this one where Iron Man reappears, and thus, yeah, it demonstrates something that I love about these later appearances by the same characters. That things do happen between the movies, especially that the technology improves, gadgets get better, everything the heroes use to do heroic stuff develops further. I honestly think every franchise that is even slightly like this should do this, and I'm not just saying that for the purpose of new toys to buy. While I have no problem with people who do buy them, I myself haven't for at least a decade, but we should feel that things are going further, and you could do it in the other direction too. If a major character is stuck in one place over the course of several movies, or between the end of one movie and the start of the next, maybe they used up a lot of what they had. The equipment has suffered because they haven't been able to repair it. Something like that. But yeah, in this you see he has improved the Iron Man suit since the first movie. I mean, in the first movie you see that he's really struggling to get that suit off. And then in this, he literally steps, off goes the suit, and he's wearing a tuxedo. It's a huge dichotomy between the two, and yeah, it's something, he got the suit off, and he had, he spent some time figuring out, how do I make it easier to get the suit off, and smoother, so that I can make a public appearance out of it, and such, because he does love the spotlight being on him, but yeah, I really appreciate that, and that's something that I think, for example, the X-Men movies, I mean, I love the first two movies, but not that much happens to really show. I forget. Maybe the second movie is supposed to take place like very shortly after the first one, because I'm not going to spoil them in this video, but there's something at the end of the first movie that pays off very early in the second movie. Yeah, there's something that is suggested will happen soon at the very end of the first movie that happens very early in the second movie. You know, not it happened a while ago and now this movie is happening. It's very possible that the two movies take place, I don't know, a few months apart maybe or something. I forget. I think it might be said in one of the movies what the, you know, or on a DVD extra or something. But it's a, and you know, to be fair, then the third one has the Danger Room, which is a huge, you know, it's nothing like anything we see them have, you know, of technology in the first two, although it was supposed to be in the first one. And possibly the second one. Yeah, it was, you know, budget cuts, that stuff like that. Anyway, yeah, I think the MCU does a really great job of making it believable, and that's where, you know, suddenly having the Danger Room didn't really feel. It seems like if they had that the whole time, they should have mentioned it before, and it doesn't seem like it's something they could have just built between the second and third movie. So yeah. Which, I don't think they're supposed to take place very far apart, because something that happens at the very end of the second one, at the beginning of the third one, it seems like, okay, so it must have happened recently, so, yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's something I think the MCU does amazingly well, and absolutely should, you know, yeah, I'm not gonna spoil the Avengers in this video, but in the Avengers, we do find that Cap has a suit, a uniform, that is somewhat different from the one he had in the first. And they specifically say, you know, we improved the designs, and, you know, obviously, since, you know, it's been 70 years between yeah, that is not a spoiler. Everyone who knows Captain America knows he was frozen for decades. So, you know, it depends on how many decades depends on if you're going by the comic books or these movies, or, yeah. So yeah, in Avengers they say, you know, we improved the suit, and yeah, we do genuinely see that in the movies. They gradually improve these things. Now, like the first one, the thing killing Americans is, in part, but very directly, American weapons manufacturers and/or arms dealers. And this is the first movie to show Iron Man after the original Solo film, which was where we first saw him. And so it starts the... I guess I wrote that exact note. Yeah, some of these notes I wrote days apart, so... Yeah, so I want to point out, they've kept up this trend for 8 years. You know, 2010 to 2018, they actually, you know, again, you know, if you're watching this in the future, you might note that the date I post this video is indeed before Infinity War comes out. But even from the trailers and just in Black Panther, you can tell, you know, stuff has gone further than, you know, if the suits that T'Challa wears in Black Panther, the solo movie, if those had been around during Infinity War, why didn't he wear them then? So yeah, in addition to the fact that they specifically say, yeah, I built this since last time. I think I've said this before, possibly more than once, but I do really want to mention, you know, I just rewatched Iron Man 3 not many days ago. That movie's action scenes are some of the most dynamic and well-paced of any MCU movie. They really just, like, they sat down and said, you know what, we've had a lot of just, like, Tony in the suit flying around, blowing stuff up. Let's try to do something different. And they came up with a lot of different, and it's super cool. Like, the third movie could so easily just have been scene after scene of him flying and blowing stuff up. And this movie could have, but this movie is nowhere near as dynamic and varied as the third movie. I'm not saying that the first two should have been or could have been, but if the third one hadn't, I think that would have been a missed opportunity. Now, Black Widow's first real action scene, the hallway, is the only action scene of hers in the entire MCU where it feels like she's just using gadgets to show she has them. So they heard the complaints about that scene and adjusted for the next ones. And honestly, on this rewatch, I didn't feel like it was that bad, but yeah, I do think that they do a better job in the next many appearances by her. You know, she doesn't really seem to do... Yeah, in this, I mean, she uses these different gadgets because they only had the one scene where they wanted to show them off, where they could show them off at all, and so they wanted to show off as many of them as they at all could. It's fan service, and it feels kind of awkward. And again, I get it. It sucks to not get to, but ultimately, it's just not that. It's just the scene doesn't end up being as good as if they didn't do that. But again, all the other ones. I mean, I suppose you could say that there might be people who are like, she uses those zappy things to zap people at the neck way too much in the next several movies that she's in. I don't think so, but I can understand, you know, maybe you think maybe she, every so often she should, instead of zapping them, maybe shoot, like, you know, poison dart, you know, sleeping poison, if that's what's necessary, into their neck instead of zapping them. Yeah, sure, maybe, but this one, it's genuinely just excessive. It's a little annoying that Hammer trusts Rourke so blindly until near the end. Did I already say that? I think I might have already said that. I've forgotten that it was in these notes. Hammer and Rourke have a Batman Forever, Riddler, and Two-Face thing going on, but Forever also makes Riddler also be cruel, not just an idiot who gets taken advantage of. Now, on the commentary, Favreau says when, you know, when he has the strawberries, it's important that Tony goes to talk to Pepper and happens to discover the model, rather than going to Pepper at the office just to pick up the model in order to help him with this thing. I agree, but it does make the model discovery feel contrived more so than already, and just, yeah, it's one of those things where, like, from an emotional standpoint, you want Tony to be going to Pepper to say, I need you, among other things. You know, he rambles on, but he does say, I need you. But from a plot standpoint, I mean, come on, you know, he just, again, it's literally life or death, and he's trying to do this thing, and it seems like it makes sense for him to go to the office to get the model. You know, he would know that the model is there, and that you know, and he would have figured out from the from the real footage of his father. You know, he says it's right in front of you, or this is the key, or something like that. You know, so yeah, the scene could play either way. They chose to play it that way. I don't think there's a good way to do it ultimately. I mean, I guess if the model. Maybe if the model had been in his, you know, down in his, yeah, they got him the model when they got him the real, the footage. And he just, like, yeah, he said to Jarvis, you know, make a model, you know, make a digital version of this model. And Jarvis said, that's going to take, you know, several hours. And he's like, I'm going to spend that time with Pepper. You know, maybe that would work. But that would also break up the flow of him figuring out the thing of the model. Something like that. But, yeah, as it is, you know, I'd say overall the movie, when you watch the first movie and you know that they didn't have a finished script when they started filming, you can sort of tell. There are scenes where you can tell. And for this one, I think they had a finished script, and certainly they were more able to go, excuse me, to do things that they wanted to do, which I guess, considering how much of it turned out not as good as the first one, maybe is one of those things where, you know, hardship leads to something. You know, a lot of movies have been improved by censorship, and I say that as someone who hates censorship and have almost nothing positive to say about censorship, whilst also realizing that there are certain things that maybe children shouldn't see in films. I'm not showing an 8-year-old David Cronenberg's The Fly, for example, not till he's 9. That's a joke. If I have to say that, yeah. Anyway, had a finished script for this one, and yeah, that, you know, that scene should maybe have gone, you know, been rewritten some, but other than that, you know, the overall plot structure and such, I guess, basically does. Yeah. And that is the end of the written notes. I think that is going to be it for this one. But yeah, again, there's some good and some bad in this movie. And, you know, it is yeah, Captain America 1, yes, I do think Thor 1 and definitely the Avengers are better Phase 1 movies. And yeah, ultimately, I mean, this and Thor 2 are the only MCU movies that I look at and I think, well, I guess that's underwhelming. I enjoyed the second Thor movie immensely when I first watched it, but then, you know, watching it and watching some of the others and such, just, yeah, it's not. I think if just the villain had more personality, and maybe they shouldn't have gone so far in the interest of comic relief, you know, yeah. But this movie ultimately just it's underwhelming considering how good the first one was and how many people worked on both movies. And yeah, you know, and it's not just, you know, you know, Favreau actually thought, you know, ultimately he said he wouldn't return as director for the third one, but he did reprise the role of Happy, and again in Homecoming. And I forget if he's listed as being in Infinity War, but anyway, yeah, so yeah, because they kept coming to him with rewrites and telling him to put in stuff, and the shield scenes certainly do feel out of place, but ultimately, if you recut the movie and you removed as much of shield as you could, it still wouldn't have been as compelling of a movie as the first one by far, and as it should have been, at least. You know, it's just, considering they did have new ideas, you know, they didn't, it's not just the first movie again, you know, but yeah, I think I've said everything about it. So yes, still coming up, Captain America 1 and the Avengers 1, you know, additional videos on them, but it's, you know, I forgot to say when I recorded the Thor one that it will be a few weeks. Yeah, the current schedule, in 1 week, I expect to watch and review The Strangers 2, which looks fun, if not necessarily entirely as, like, you know, one of the strengths of the first one is the fact that it is this very, I mean, there are a few things that cause the movie to lose at least a bit of credibility, but ultimately, you know, it's not like it feels intimate and real compared to a lot, you know, There are people who call the first movie a slasher movie. I guess you could kind of call it that, but it's very different from a lot of slashers. And again, I say that as someone who loves a lot of entries in the subgenre. You know, again, you can't see it now, but I usually do put up, you know, the Freddy movies and the Jason movies behind me. You know, I said a lot of negative things about the Jason movies and the Freddy movies, but yeah, I really enjoy sitting down and watching, you know, not the fact that I'm seeing teenagers get slaughtered in, you know, creative ways or such, but just the, yeah, I don't know, anyway, yes, I expect in 1 week to be the second Strangers movie. In another week, the review, now done series thoughts, of Married with Children. Captain America 1, I expect to be the 14th of next month. And let's see if I can... The Avengers should be the week after, the 21st. And the 28th is going to be Infinity War. And I can't wait. I don't think there's any way that movie could possibly let me down. You know, the first Avengers didn't. The second Avengers didn't. Both of those movies exceeded my expectations. You know, so did so did Winter Soldier in Civil War. So did Iron Man 3. You know, Black Panther. And I had incredibly high expectations for all of those movies. You know, so in some ways, Thor 2 and 3 also. And Guardians of the Galaxy, both of those. And Spider-Man, yeah. Again, I'm just going to be saying that they're all amazing. And, yeah. And that gets repetitive to listen to. But, yeah, I am absolutely psyched for Infinity War. And once again, you know, if you didn't watch the Thor video, that is why I'm doing more videos on the Phase 1 ones. You know, those are the only ones where I feel like I really had a lot of significant stuff to say, shut up, it is significant, that I hadn't already said in these videos. So that covers that. Once again, hope it's been as enjoyable to watch as it was to perform.